Floyd, a Category 4 hurricane as big as the state of Texas, tracked through the Bahamas with 155-mile-an-hour winds, threatening Florida. The mammoth storm system turned northward, paralleling the East Coast, until it finally slammed into North Carolina near Wilmington. For 5 days, Floyd had played havoc with most of America's eastern seaboard. As Floyd churned the waters just off the coast, eyeing potential targets, hundreds of thousands of families boarded up their coastal homes, fleeing inland. Tens of thousands of automobiles clogged interstate highways and secondary roads, with people seeking shelter from the hurricane. This is the story of how this one huge storm system forced the biggest evacuation in U.S. history, and how thousands of first responders across the country mobilized to orchestrate the daunting task of evacuating and sheltering nearly 3 million people.
Hurricane watch will be put up for some portion of the Florida coast.
As Floyd eyed Daytona Beach, Florida's coast to coast, an 8-county chapter of the American Red Cross, began the enormous task of setting up 48 shelters in an 8-county area, 12 hours before the official decision was made to evacuate.
With a hurricane, you have just a little bit more time than what you do with a tornado or a flood. So it wasn't as helter-skelter as what a lot of people would think, but your butterflies in your stomach keep pumping up.
Bob Elwell, logistics coordinator for the chapter, was one of the first volunteers called. After sending his own family inland to safety, Elwell headed to the Red Cross.
I didn't go back home for 3 days. I stayed at the Red Cross, I slept at the Red Cross, I answered phones. Once you start an operation like this, you don't like to break it. But we are trained, and we train ourselves that the first 72 hours of a storm, it's ours. We have to take care of it.
With a 10 to 20-foot storm surge expected to inundate many of Volusia County's coastal communities, residents prepared for evacuation. Joe and Ruby Dutch were 2 of the hundreds of volunteers for Red Cross Disaster Services who put aside their own worries and went to work to help others. Their shelter at Horizon Elementary School housed about 250 people. But in Florida alone, nearly 12,000 evacuees sought refuge in shelters for the general public, as well as special needs shelters for people who need assistance on a daily basis. Patrick Johnson, assistant nursing director of the Volusia County Health Department, furiously boarded up his own home and immediately went to work. His job was to make sure that 6 special needs shelters were ready to go by 6 p.m. the day the evacuation was announced.
I was concerned that with this evacuation, we were going to do the full event, meaning opening up all of our shelters at one time, which we have never done before with special needs.
By the time Hurricane Floyd clipped the Florida coast, more than 600 people with an average age of 72 had poured into the special needs shelters run by Patrick Johnson. But Hurricane Floyd refused to make landfall and continued its trek up the East Coast.
Well, the storm surge, this map shows you where one of the most vulnerable areas in the United States should the hurricane...
Next to scramble into action were first responders in Georgia, bracing for a possible direct hit on Savannah and Tybee Island.
In Georgia, we were preparing for the worst, of course. We had a storm about the size of the state of Texas that was going between Category 5 and Category 4. We were experiencing evacuees coming north from Florida. And as the storm started to turn, evacuees were heading in from the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. The state of Georgia had in excess of 4,000 employees deployed to the coastal and middle Georgia area where we were impacted the most by shelterees. And that represented about 14 agencies. And of course, we were in support of the thousands of local government employees that were working this potential disaster.
Well, Floyd again has taken a little bit of a turn to the north this morning. That may be good news for Florida, maybe not so good news from coastal Georgia up through the Carolinas.
Still, Floyd wouldn't make landfall. Roaring past Georgia, it headed for North Carolina. And this time, the frantic work by first responders wasn't in vain. In Wichita Falls, Texas, Bev Schumann and Sherry Gaymar, mass care specialists on call 24 hours a day, were 2 Red Cross volunteers to respond to the crisis.
For Hurricane Floyd, they called us the night before, and we had to be down here probably about 7 o'clock in the morning to head out.
The volunteers drove their IRV, an emergency response vehicle, nearly 1,000 miles in 2 days to their staging area in Atlanta.
These three major cities, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and Charleston, you're probably under the gun more than anybody else right now as it continues to the north.
On September 16th, Hurricane Floyd, a Category 2 hurricane with 90-knot winds, barreled into Cape Verde, North Carolina, near Wilmington, leaving families desperately in need of shelter, food, and water. And first responders were there to help.
Going to Wilmington, we didn't leave until it got dark, so we're driving on these roads, and we have to be careful because a lot of the roads are flooded. We have to call ahead to, say, the DPS, the EOC, see if any roads are open that we're going to be traveling on or closed or whatever. We don't really know what to expect, and we don't have any expectations because we know that we don't know what it's going to be like.
Once on location, it was not unusual for volunteers to work 14 and 16-hour days, preparing, serving, and delivering meals to the thousands of people staying in shelters, as well as to those who were stranded in their homes without power or water.
Okay, do you have some bottled water in your house? So I like what we call, my partner and I, ground zero, going in there working one-on-one with the people that have been affected by the storms. Just because it's raining or the wind's blowing or it's freezing cold, we just bundle up and get out there and make sure that they have a warm meal, because that may be all they have. They've got so much going on in their life. If we can help them have a better day, that's why we're there. What keeps me going when I'm out there soaking wet, tired, cold, is the fact that I have a home to come back to when I get back to Wichita Falls, Texas. These people don't have anything. All their stuff is blown away or it's been damaged in the flood. And just knowing that somebody else that has something can be there and has sacrificed to help these people, it really makes their day. It makes them realize, gosh, I am important and Red Cross is here to help me.
Hurricane Floyd's massive flooding caused one of the worst natural disasters in North Carolina history. Sherry Gamar and Bev Schumann stayed there, helping countless victims of the storm for a total of 42 days.
I'm a people person, and if somebody needs somebody, I want to be there to help them. I really don't consider myself a hero. I'm just another person trying to help somebody else. I just do what's in my heart.
I get asked why I do this a lot, and I don't know if I've ever come up with a good answer. I get a lot of satisfaction knowing that in some small way I can help somebody else. It's an adventure, going into the unknown, because it is all unknown. You don't know where you're going to stay. You don't know what you're going to do. Don't know what the next 24 hours is going to hold for you. You don't know when you're coming home. Red Cross has a pamphlet, and it shows a picture of a guy. He's all dirty. He's got a hard hat on, and it says, you may not get any dirtier. You may not work any harder. But it'll be the best job you never got paid to do. And I don't know, that I carry that around with me, and it just means a lot to me.